Hello, my name is Tom Jacobs. I'm on the web at tdjacobs.com. I'm an evolutionary astrologer, also a channel, energy worker, do all kinds of different healing work, psychic medium, intuitive, blah, 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 all kinds of things. I want to do a quick video today on kind of a Trump update. I've done several of these, not videos, but I've done audio on SoundCloud off and on for several years. If you go to SoundCloud and look up in quotes Tom Jacobs, unquote, and then Trump, you'll see the things I've done on him. One thing that I was reminded of the other day is this audio thing from January of 2019 called Trump Update, Pluto in the 12th house, and the inevitability of submission. And when I read that title, I thought, oh, it's kind of a, kind of a dramatic kind of image, but it is. When you have Pluto in the 12th house, your empowerment journey rests upon learning how to surrender, to work with the world around you. And it is possible to fight that and resist it for many, many lifetimes, or for most of every lifetime, right? Eventually, a person finds, right, these disempowering scenarios that cause the person like force into evolution and growth. So anyway, so I was thinking about if Trump is impeached in January 2019, I was thinking if he is, just kind of looking at what that would mean, right? So this teaching, so I encourage you to stop this video. If you haven't heard that, I think it's 45 minutes. It's worth the investment if you want to understand the bigger picture about how this works. This video today is, I think I'm going to call it, I forgot, I had it yesterday. Sorry, and there's some like stupid music in this cafe. What is it called? Oh, I was gonna put my earplugs in. I guess you get to watch me do that. Hold on. What is it called? Okay, seriously, I can't remember. I'm gonna pause the thing here. I've got it. What Trump's soul is thinking. So that's the title of this teaching today. So again, I encourage you to check out the Trump update from January 2019, Pluto in the 12th house, and the inevitability of submission. Okay, so first, it's a little teeny bit on soul. Well, let me just preface this in saying I say I'm an evolutionary astrologer. I am. But I don't do the exact same thing that Steve Forrest does, who I've studied with, or Jeff Green. A lot of people presume that Jeff Green's teachings are the only ones out there, and then they find Steve Forrest and they're confused. Whatever. It's just the reality is that different people are thinking in evolutionary astrology terms, and I am one of them. So the way I do it is I look at Pluto as the empowerment journey that the soul sets out for the human in many lifetimes, or the humans, its humans, in many lifetimes. And then I proceed to define soul in a way that no other EA people have done. So what I'm doing with EA, and somebody recently told me I should just change the name of what I'm doing because it would help people who presume that one of those two teachings is the only teaching that's out there, or the only way to think about EA. I don't yet know if I'll do that, but I define soul in terms of the channeling of an ascended master that I've brought through for quite a number of years. So I want to give you a teeny little overview of that, but check out my other videos on karma and Pluto and, the Unraveling Karma podcasts, which episodes 1 through 27, most of them are in my blog at tdjacobs.com. And then I think 3 episodes are on as videos, 28, 29, and 30 are on YouTube here. You can watch and follow on with the charts. But anyway, I have a different definition of karma, and I teach it can be changed, and I teach how to change it because I have a different definition of soul. So anyway, so I'm just going to give you a little overview here. And in my books, the Soul's Journey trilogy, 1, 2, and 3, this is explained. And also the EA Basics home study course that I offer through tdjacobs.com will explain all of this in deep detail, quite wide detail or deep detail. So first of all, soul is a portion of divine consciousness. goddess, God energy, all that is, divine intelligence, creator energy, source. Soul is a portion of that. So behind your personality, behind the personality of every human, is a soul, is divine consciousness. So soul can't be wounded in this model of soul that I teach. You can't harm it. You can't anger it. You can't disappoint it. So if you carry shame or disappointment or pain or sorrow or grief, or you've hurt yourself or hurt others, your soul is divine love. So you can't harm it. It's watching from outside time, all the various human selves it's connected to, you and your past lives. I say your soul's other life selves, right? Your other selves. It's watching what you're going to do when you're confronted with pain, anger, happiness. What beliefs will you codify and crystallize and solidify? When pain happens, will you learn to go from fear into love, which is the mission of every soul, because soul knows it's love, but it can't learn anything because it already knows it's love. So it comes here, embodies as us, to feel separate, to have the perception of separateness, in order to learn what it's like to go from fear into love, how to become loving, how to become strong. Soul knows always that it's always strong because it's loving. Anyway, the EA Basics 1 course explains all of this. It's not an astrology basics course, but it's the evolutionary astrology that I teach, the basics of that. So it does presume, and my site says this, but it does presume that you know houses, signs, and aspects, and you understand houses, planets, houses, signs, and aspects. So your soul is divine love, is aligned with divine love, watching if you are going to learn something about that, if you are going to choose to move in that direction. Okay, so now moving on to, let me just say this regarding Pluto. This empowerment path the soul sets out for the humans. It involves disempowerment. It involves feeling powerless. And then all of the things that humans do to deal with it, or give into it, or try to compensate for it. So as I've explored in different teachings on Trump, with his Pluto in the 12th house, this idea of the inevitability of submission. The 12th house, you've heard it probably in your astrology travels and studies, you've heard it said that it's the house of self-undoing, or the house of institutions. It is a house of loss, because if you attempt to derive power from external 3D oriented or material world situations, your highest good includes learning at some point that those things do not derive strength and power, do not provide a solid basis for you to be confident. The way I teach about Plutonian empowerment is absolute unflinching, unashamed self-knowledge, which requires the shadow work that you're familiar with, followed by absolute unflinching, unashamed self-acceptance. So you look at the monster, you look at the shadow, and you love it and you accept it. Thereby, you're not holding something out of your consciousness. You're not spending a bunch of energy trying not to, what would I do, or what would it, what if I had strength, or I could hurt somebody, or I could hurt myself, or maybe I'm greedy, or. So when you own what appears to be worthy of being made a shadow, then you have this increased sense of strength, and that's Plutonian empowerment over the long term. You can keep an eye out also for the Pluto Healing Intensive that I do. I guess I've done it like once per year. I did it twice in 2018, but once in 2019, but I'm sure I'll do one in 2020 somewhere. 4-day healing intensive to really get into this and unlock stuff under the surface for you. But what does your path look like, right? That intensive setting is a really great way to unravel things and do a bunch of intense energy work to clear things too. But anyway, the nature of Plutonian material is to always try to come up from the unconscious into conscious awareness. Well, what do we do with that? I'm ashamed, I'm afraid, I don't know. So absolute unflinching, unashamed self-knowledge followed by absolute unflinching, unashamed self-acceptance. That's the Plutonian pathway. So along the course of a person's life, that person will encounter fear, doubt, shame, guilt, anger, grief, loss, whatever. So again, check out that teaching, but I'm gonna pull up Trump's natal chart. I pulled up let me just say this. My last prefatory note is this. I put up transits and progressions for today. I'm not going to really look at them because it is valuable to look at transits and progressions, of course, when you're looking at events. And I made it for yesterday, December 18th, 2019, the day that the U.S. House of Representatives voted to impeach him. But I'm going to focus more on the natal signature and understanding, 73 years of exploring certain themes, and then having, we understand this event of impeachment being kind of a major post along the road, a major herm along his path. So I'm going to pull up his chart, and maybe I'll draw on it too. Let me just figure out how to do that. Hold on. Okay, there it is. Okay, so then we're going to say slide. Whoops, no, not that. Slideshow from beginning. I just have the one slide here. So here's that Pluto in the 12th, of course. So just it didn't work. Anyway, I was cutting and pasting. Anyway, oh, that's right. In the slideshow, you can't do that. Anyway, so I'll just point this out, and I'll circle it with the mouse. So with this Pluto in the 12th, how can I learn that especially in Leo, how can I learn that my ego is not the only thing, right? How can I learn to become empowered by being part of the cosmos? And we know that, he spent a lot of time and energy not submitting to anything bigger than, the noise he makes and his attitude, right? And by demanding loyalty, he thinks that's going to protect him, right? If he feels like he has people surrounding him and orbiting him, it's Pluto and Leo, right? Then he feels that he's protected. So he's actually praising the people who are lying and just ignoring facts on his behalf. Okay, so there's that. That's a pattern. I want to point out two things I have explored in other MP3s on SoundCloud, but I just want to point them out in terms of why, and this is the point of this video, even if, like, what is Trump's soul thinking? Even if he's not removed from office, like if he's acquitted in the US Senate, which looks very likely will happen, we have to wait a month or more to know that, but to see how that plays out in 3D. But even if he's acquitted, right? Even if he's acquitted and then reelected, which is possible, I guess, this impeachment is super important for his growth as a soul. Okay, so given that, what is his soul thinking? First of all, if you are someone who thinks he doesn't have a soul, he does. We all do. Every single person does. And every single one of us is on a learning trajectory to learn certain lessons laid out by our soul. I also want to mention the idea of Pluto in the 12th can also be people being an example for the masses or for the world at large. One of the desires, unconscious desires with Pluto in the 12th house can be affecting the world or having a broad effect on, The idea is sometimes we feel insignificant because we know that we're one little speck in this great thing, but we're trying to puff ourselves up so we don't. And that's where we get kind of the megalomania that can happen with Pluto-Neptune aspects or Pluto in the 12th house. Ultimately, it's about being humbled enough that you own the power you do have and then own it and work it. But if you think you're the only person who exists, or you're the apex of evolution, or you're the greatest thing ever, that does lead us to a fall, whatever it is. So I want to talk about how his soul sees this impeachment and also the patterns, right? Well, let me just talk about a couple things in his natal chart. So there's a Pluto in the 12th, right? And there's that Mars on the ascendant in the 12th, combative, defensive, adding to the Pluto in the 12th house kind of paranoia that he's not safe, right? And then the idea about, why he doesn't understand, like why his personality doesn't understand that he did something wrong. Well, we know he doesn't have experience in government. We know that. But here's his sun on the North Node in the 10th house. This is super important. North Node says, I haven't learned this in a bunch of lifetimes, or I haven't had healthy examples. Sun, how to have an ego, right? And if you spend your whole career in life cheating, you have one way of doing it, but he doesn't understand the public service aspect of the 10th house, or having an idea, what could the world use more of? Could I become the person who could offer that? Do I want that? He doesn't have that ambition to be of service that a lot of people with 10th house active placements do. His sun is there, but again, he hasn't had a healthy example of that. So he has certain ideas about being an executive, right? He thinks that because he got elected, that he deserves respect, where the rest of the world is kind of operating on this thing of, if you achieve something respectable, then we respect you, and, more often than not. But then I want to talk about the South Node ruler, Jupiter, as indicating his path in many lifetimes. I look at the South Node as conditioning environments that your soul chooses for you to be born into, including family in many lifetimes. You're trained to see the world through a certain lens. And with the moon on the 4th house South Node, tribalism, strong beliefs, Sagittarius, like, you can't reason with him because he's decided he knows everything, even though he doesn't learn anything. So the North Node then is something you haven't experienced much of, but you have to grow into, right? Figure out healthy models of, right? Okay. South Node ruler is Jupiter here, and it's in the house of self-esteem, and it's retrograde conjunct Chiron and Juno. Sorry, and Juno. So South Node ruler says, I show up as unique individuals, and I'm afraid of being rejected by others. That's the insecurity that's at the core of all of his malfunctions, or all of the things that kind of go haywire with him personally, where then he's trying to organize the world to protect him. He feels unsafe because he has a deep, in many lifetimes, not just this one, he has a deep sense of vulnerability, because his soul is saying, I wonder what it's like to be afraid, to feel unsafe. What will I do? In a certain sense, that's the journey of every human. But for him, with these signatures, I'm afraid of, like Sun of the North Node in the 10th, I need to be sane. I need to own confidence, to be ambitious. Okay, in certain ways he's done that. But the personal vulnerability, the Chiron, the teaching on his Chiron thing I did, Trump on SoundCloud, I have a picture of him at like 6 years old, and it's called Donnie, a Chiron story. Because I just perceive that he's run all the time, well, most of the time, by a vulnerable, sensitive human child, right? A sensitive person is at the core of him, right? It is. I'm telling you this. I'm saying that for those people who say he doesn't have a soul, or how could he? Look what he does to these families at the border and everything else. He does. Okay, so this insecurity and vulnerability, he's a teacher for us in certain ways. Like his soul is saying, aha, I'll offer myself, my experience up as a teacher for the collective. How will you deal with fear? How will you deal with the idea if you don't feel safe, or if you don't know how to own your vulnerability, right? You could look at Trump as a turning point in the evolution of our modern consciousness, as representing the opportunity for a turning point. Will you own your sensitivity? Will you own your vulnerability? It's up to you. But here's one of the ways that it can work if you won't, because you're afraid of being seen as weak. That's why when those things like the toilet paper getting stuck to the bottom of his shoe as he's walking up the staircase thingy to Air Force One a year or two ago, that's these humiliations, right? Because he's always on the edge, being afraid of how others see him and expecting that's why he's always lashing out. I mean, that image, and also the one of the not being able to close the umbrella, also going into Air Force One in the rain. He's walking away from the cameras. It's a quiet moment. He's not shouting over the sound of a helicopter, right? He's not berating a journalist. He's not being asked a question and then being defensive and being on the attack and whatever. He's not, trying to shame anybody or call anybody names. He's walking away from the cameras to go, so it's like this moment of, you get the different kind of energy, right? It's vulnerability. We're all afraid to be vulnerable. Anyway, so that's part of the thing that his soul has agreed to give us an example of. Now, given that, Sun on the 10th, in the 10th house, I need to be ambitious, but on the North Node, I haven't been taught good examples, right? And then the South Node in Sagittarius, I'm not open. Like Gemini North Node, I haven't been taught how to be open-minded. How many Geminis do you know who don't read? It's his Gemini North Node, right? He thinks he knows everything. He believes he knows everything. That famous gut instinct he relies upon. Okay, so there's that. And then you have this vulnerability of the South Node ruler in the second house, right? The house of self-esteem, the sign of Libra. I'm aware of how others see me. Chiron, I'm so vulnerable. I don't want you to see how I think I'm weak or how I think I'm a helpless child, right? That's a Chiron issue some people have. And he really exemplifies. And then the Pluto in the 12th, I'm afraid of being overpowered by life or circumstance. I'm afraid of being overwhelmed. Now we get to this. What is his soul thinking regarding this impeachment thing? What his soul is thinking is this. So that's what it feels like. That's what it feels like to not get away with something, right? And then you think, this is kind of where I want to go with this. Because the soul is watching the human go through a bunch of experiences. What is it like if you believe this? What does it feel like? Because part of the process here, not just learning to go from fear into love, that all humans are challenged to do, but also really importantly, to learn how to process emotion while embodied. Because remember, the soul is aligned with love. It doesn't need to learn how to become loving. It's curious. What's it like when you're in this kind of dense physical structure to process energy? And again, learn to go from fear into love. So this impeachment thing is really important because he has a pride about how he imagines his legacy will be. I've heard political commentators talk about this recently on the YouTube videos, and the journalists write about it in opinion pieces and stuff. And he really does care about that. And let's have compassion for someone who has now have to give up and now has to give up the image, right? That he's going to have a great reputation, that he's doing well. He's not doing well. He's being really destructive and harming people and catering to a minority. But the reality of that sanction or that censure, it will follow him throughout the rest of his life and long after. And this is what I want to get to. Because this sensitivity toward like needing validation, Sun in the 10th house on the 10th house North Node, I need to know that I'm worth respect. South Node ruler in the house of self-esteem and the sign of other people and their responses, conjunct Chiron, I'm vulnerable, I'm afraid you don't like me, I'm pretty sure you don't like me, wait, I think I must be a loser. That's what's in the little kid's heart inside him. I say that with compassion, because as angry as the constant lying and abuse makes me, I do see the soul behind this. And I'm encouraging all of us too. It's okay to be angry about the certain things. It's okay to appreciate certain things about what he does too. I don't happen to, but if you do, okay. But let's have compassion for the fact that this is a soul's journey who's having its experience and also providing an example to others through this constant media barrage. Okay. So the soul understands the emotional impact through something like this impeachment. Again, even if he is not removed from office, even if he is reelected, right? Or let's say that he's not reelected and he just moves on with his life and does whatever he chooses, like he used to, right? Not being in that box of everybody watching you constantly and with a judging thing, like as a businessman, as a game show host, he, had some of that as a celebrity, but not the constant criticism, right? That is so hard for him to deal with. So let's say that he just moves on. This will never be okay. He'll always be bitter about it because he doesn't understand what it takes to get respect, because he doesn't understand you have to build it yourself. He doesn't respect himself. It's all the power over power under, shaming other people to try to look good. So what does his soul think about this impeachment? The soul goes, oh, that's what it's like. Yeah, you feel really bitter because they don't like you. And you did everything you could, right? But again, working with this model of taking and not giving. The model of ego with sun on the north node in the 10th house can be, well, what one thinks power is and what an executive should be like. So, his soul is watching him experience this and is understanding. Yeah, that's what it's like. Oh, that's what it feels like. And all the feeling data comes back to soul outside time. It's true for all of us. When we go through hardship, the soul is watching and learning. Well, that's what it's like. If you believe this and you think this is happening, and then you make that choice, oh, that's what results. That's what it feels like. Like there's an endless checklist of things to go through, right? So from your brain's vantage point, and even his brain's vantage point, perhaps, if he's not removed from office, let's say this, if he's impeached but nothing ends his presidency, right? Let's say it that way. Like nothing really bad happens. This is really bad because it's a mark that is proof of what he's experienced his whole life, which is that others don't respect him really. I've heard some talking head commentators talk about who are from New York, talking about how New Yorkers have always not accepted him and how hard that's been for him, judging those elitists and those elites and whatever, and how he's just not respectable because he's coarse, and he never grew into any kind of maturity that others might respect, and the way he did business is, the way he's done business is, not respectable, crooked, but that everybody knows it, right? Everybody may not know all the details, but everybody knows it, and how that rejection has been for him, right? And then I'm reminded of the White House press dinner in 2011, when Seth Meyers roasted him, being in the audience because he was being, he was giving such a hard time to Obama constantly, and the look on Trump's face during that, when the camera focuses on him, I believe that's when he decided that he was going to run for president, because he needed to prove that he wasn't a laughingstock. So all of this is essentially about this vulnerability and his own self-esteem issues. Now, as I say that, then you're going to go back to your life and just, if you're aware of the news, you're going to be aware of the lies and attacks and constant lies and more lies and more constant lies and attacks. And, I think that because of the impeachment thing, he will never, ever be okay again. Just that he will never, this is that perception of that thing that the world is judging him. And it's like a permanent mark. He knows that. And he'll never come out of it. Now, it's not that his destiny. It's not that he can change his mind. But the point is, if you look to others to validate you, you're going to be unhappy about it. And if you resort to attacking people, eventually they're going to come back. And if you put out a tremendous amount of negative energy, it's going to come back. Not because you're being punished, which is what he perceives. That's what the problem with Pluto on the 12th can be, feeling punished. And that's one of the underlying core wounds in the unconscious that drives some of his behaviors. I say that because I Pluto on the 12th and I have the same thing. I get it. I see it. The vitriol and the anger or whatever, I catch myself before I do that. But I get it. What I don't get is the 10th house thing, because I actually do have a desire to be of service. That's because my south node's there. I've been through that, right? His north node's there, he hasn't. South node, you've done it in a bunch of lifetimes. You've been shown different ways to be of service in the world or whatever with the 10th house south node. Or what can result from bringing something of value to your community in some way. You can get paid for it. Fine, great, awesome, please do. So it's not, when I say public service, I don't mean some kind of only volunteer work. It includes that, certainly. Or something selfless, whatever. It can be like that. But you can also get paid for it. It can be a career. It can be a job. can put a price on what you do. It's fine. But anyway, bringing something valuable to the community because you care about the world, or you care that the lives of the people next to you are better, right? He doesn't understand. That's the only thing I don't. That's the thing I really don't relate to. I understand it being a medium and a channel and an astrologer, but being a spiritual counselor, I get it. But I don't relate to that part. But the Pluto in the 12th, I do relate to. The fear of being overwhelmed, the fear of being punished, right? So anyway, he perceives all of this as punishment. From the soul's point of view, it's not punishment. From the soul's point of view, it's manifesting a real world scenario that, sorry, the guy wasn't looking at me, he was looking at a sign in front of me on the website. Oh my God, I'm in public. It's manifesting a real world scenario that you cannot deny impedes you or doesn't give you what you want, right? So anyway, so we're coming close to the end of the video, but I just want to give you insights into how the soul sees the impeachment and this whole journey for him. Is the soul happy that he became president? Soul doesn't care. Soul doesn't care if I have 1 or 2 cups of coffee. Soul doesn't care if he builds a giant building. Soul doesn't care if you remember your dog's birthday or not. Like, soul doesn't care about those things. You can't harm it. He can't harm it. Nobody can harm can't harm my soul by having 2 cups of coffee, whatever. But the soul is watching what you do, engaging how you learn through your emotional experiences, and if you will go from fear into love. And this is a kind of thing where I say he won't ever be the same. It kind of escalates the tension. Ultimately, there's a breaking point for any person. For him, he probably will rant and rave because he's too afraid to become vulnerable, because the stress will build for him. I'm not making a prediction or wishing ill on him at all, but the stress will build until he cracks open and cries out 10,000 lifetimes of fighting, being vulnerable. All right. Anyway, thanks for your time and energy, and perhaps something in here is helpful. Take care of yourself, and you can see what I'm up to at tdjacobs.com. And if you want to understand more, the full story of how I teach this model of soul and then get into evolutionary astrology, which is different than what other EA practitioners are doing. So anyway, that's the EA Basics or Evolutionary Astrology Basics 1 home study course that you can check out. All right, take care.